This is a story sent in by a viewer I'll call Alex. Alex bought his first house a few years ago. It was a fixer-upper, a 2-story Victorian on the outskirts of Boston. It was old, with peeling paint and creaky floorboards, but the price was almost suspiciously low. He figured it was a great deal and a chance to build some equity. He was a practical guy, an engineer by trade, so he wasn't one to believe in ghosts or haunted houses. He was a firm believer that every strange occurrence had a logical explanation. He would soon find out how wrong he was. The new beginning. Alex closed on the house in late October, just as the chill of autumn was setting in. The previous owners had left it in a hurry, so there wasn't a lot of furniture, just the musty smell of age and disuse. The first few days were a blur of unpacking boxes, painting walls, and trying to get the utilities to cooperate. Everything seemed fine, save for the persistent, unsettling cold that clung to the air inside, even with the heat on. He attributed it to old insulation. The first sound came on the third night. Alex was in the basement, trying to figure out the archaic electrical panel, when he heard it. A faint, rhythmic scratching. It was coming from inside one of the concrete walls, near a dark, damp corner of the room. He figured it was just a mouse. Old houses had mice. It was a fact of life. He placed a few traps and forgot about it, but the scratching didn't stop. Over the next week, it got louder. It wasn't just a faint scuttling anymore. It was a deliberate, scraping sound. It sounded like something with sharp claws, or maybe even fingernails, desperately trying to get through the concrete. It would start around midnight, and it would go on for hours, sometimes until the first light of dawn. It was a constant, maddening rhythm that would seep through the floorboards and into his living room. Alex would pound on the wall, yelling for whatever it was to stop, but it never did. It was relentless. He called pest control. The exterminator came, looked around, and said he couldn't find any signs of rodents. No droppings, no nests, no chew marks. He said it was probably an old house settling, or maybe a broken pipe. Alex wasn't convinced. The sound was too purposeful, too alive. One evening, he was in the basement with a flashlight, trying to pinpoint the exact location. The scratching was coming from a section of the wall that seemed to have been reinforced with an extra layer of brick. As he ran his hand along the surface, his fingers traced a faint, almost invisible outline. It wasn't just a patch of brick, it was a door. It was seamlessly integrated into the wall, mortared over and painted, as if someone had gone to great lengths to hide it. There was a small rusted latch on the right side, barely noticeable. A shiver of genuine dread ran down his spine. The scratching suddenly stopped. Total silence. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He stood there for a full minute, listening. Then, from directly behind him, a voice, gravelly and dry as old leaves, spoke. "You should leave it be." The unwelcome visitor. Alex jumped, spinning around, his flashlight beam dancing across the room. Standing in the doorway, a shadow against the dim light from the stairs, was a man. He was old, thin, and hunched, with a face that looked like it had been carved from wood and left in the sun for a century. His eyes were a pale, unnerving blue. "Who are you?" Alex stammered, his hand still on the hidden door. "The name's Finch," the old man said, shuffling into the room. "I used to live here. My family did. It's a lot of work, isn't it?" Alex was taken aback. "I guess so. I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here." Mr. Finch didn't seem to hear him. He just stared at the wall where the scratching had been. "I built that door myself," he whispered, a strange intensity in his eyes. "Bolted it shut, mortared it over, thought it would be enough." He turned his gaze to Alex, and for a moment, Alex felt like he was looking at a ghost. "They don't like it when you try to get in. They don't like it at all." "They?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Finch just shook his head, a single slow gesture. "Never let it in. Never. You understand?" He walked past Alex, his movements silent and quick for a man his age. "Don't open the door. Don't look behind it." And just like that, he was gone. Alex stood there, alone in the basement, the silence ringing in his ears. He was a logical man, but everything about that encounter felt impossibly wrong. He ran upstairs and locked all the doors, a growing sense of panic building inside him. The scratching didn't return that night, but the silence was somehow worse. It felt like a predator lying in wait. Over the next few days, Alex tried to forget about the door and Mr. Finch. He had a few friends over for a small housewarming party. He felt normal again, with the light and laughter filling the old house. But as the night wore on and his friends were about to leave, his friend Liam went down to the basement to grab something from a box. Liam came back up a minute later, his face pale as a sheet. "Dude, I heard it," he whispered, his eyes wide. "That sound. Like someone was scraping their nails on concrete." Alex's heart sank. He tried to laugh it off, but Liam's expression was dead serious. "It's the wall," Alex said, motioning for him to follow. He showed Liam the seamless patch of wall and the nearly invisible latch. "Some old guy who used to live here said I shouldn't open it." Liam stared at it, a look of fascination and fear on his face. "Dude, you've got to open it, just for a second. We'll be quick." Reluctantly, and against every fiber of his being, Alex agreed. His fear was being overshadowed by a morbid curiosity. What could be so bad that a man would go to such lengths to hide it? The door. They grabbed a crowbar and began to pry at the mortared edges of the hidden door. The old cement crumbled easily, a cloud of dust filling the air. As the last of the mortar gave way, the scratching from within the wall began again. But this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a frantic, frenzied scraping, as if something was now desperate. Alex pushed the door open. It swung inwards with a low, groaning protest. He and Liam shone their flashlights inside. The room was small, maybe 5 feet by 5 feet, with no windows. The air was cold and stale, and a thick layer of dust coated everything. But what was in the room sent a jolt of pure terror through them. It wasn't a prison cell. It was something else entirely. In the center of the room, there was a large, circular symbol painted on the floor, in what looked like dried blood. It was a complex, geometric shape, surrounded by an outer ring of what looked like ancient, unsettling runes. In the very center of the symbol, a single, rusted iron chain hung from the ceiling. It ended in a large, heavy shackle, now lying on the floor. But that wasn't the worst part. On the far side of the room, on the interior wall, were the most horrifying marks Alex had ever seen. The surface was covered in a dense network of deep, parallel gashes. They weren't from a tool. They were too random, too frantic. They looked like something had been trying to scratch its way through the wall from the other side. They were deep and uneven, as if a large, powerful animal with long claws had been held there for an eternity. And as they watched, a small flake of concrete, dislodged by the scratching, fell to the floor. The scratching wasn't coming from outside the room. It was coming from inside the ritual circle. Alex's breath hitched in his throat. He realized his mistake. The creature wasn't trying to get out of the main wall. It was trying to get into this ritual room. Mr. Finch hadn't been warning him about what was in the room. He had been warning him about what was trying to get in. And in his curiosity, Alex had just opened the door for it. The hunt. The sound was no longer just scratching. It was a tearing, grinding noise. A monstrous screech echoed from behind the interior wall as a section of the concrete began to crumble, the old bricks giving way. A dark fissure appeared, then a jagged hole. The sounds of something wet and heavy slithering through the opening filled the small room. Alex and Liam scrambled backward, out of the room, slamming the hidden door shut. The creature was half in and half out, a black, viscous tendril snaking through the opening, its clawed tips scraping against the inside of the door. They could hear its labored, wet breathing from the other side, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. "Run! Run!" Alex screamed, pulling Liam up the stairs. They sprinted through the house, the frantic scratching and tearing from the basement now chasing them. The sound was no longer confined to the walls. It was in the floor, in the ceiling, everywhere. The house itself was groaning and cracking under the weight of this unseen horror. They reached the front door and fumbled with the locks, their hands shaking uncontrollably. They could hear it on the other side of the door, a low, rasping sound. Just as Alex finally managed to throw the deadbolt, the doorknob twisted violently. Once, twice. The door rattled, the old frame straining. They didn't hesitate. They burst through the door, leaving it ajar, and ran for Alex's car, parked at the curb. As they reached it, Alex glanced back at the house. The front door was now wide open. The darkness from inside seemed to pour out onto the lawn. Standing in the threshold, a hulking, hunched shape slowly materialized, its form barely distinguishable against the night. It was made of shadows and smoke, with long, spindly limbs ending in hooked claws. It let out a single, piercing screech, a sound that was so filled with rage and agony it made Alex's ears ring. He fumbled with the keys, his hands too unsteady to put them in the ignition. Liam was screaming beside him, his face buried in his hands. The creature, a nightmare made real, began to lurch forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. Finally, with a desperate prayer, Alex jammed the key in and turned the ignition. The engine roared to life. He slammed the gas pedal to the floor, peeling away from the curb, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. He drove until the suburban lights gave way to the blackness of the highway, the house and its horrors fading into a terrible memory. He never went back. He never packed another box. He left everything behind. His clothes, his books, his furniture. The bank eventually foreclosed on the property, but as far as he knows, no one has ever managed to live there for more than a few days. They all report the same thing, the scratching from inside the walls. But he knows the truth. The scratching isn't something trapped inside the walls. It's a warning, a desperate attempt to contain a monstrous hunger. And the real horror is that it worked. It was contained. Until he came along, a practical man who didn't believe in ghosts and let the real nightmare out. And all because of a single, fateful decision made out of simple, human curiosity. Remember, you never know what history is hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect house. Sometimes, it's best to just leave the door closed. If you enjoyed this story, and you want to hear more chilling tales from the darkest corners of the real world, be sure to hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to face the darkness with me again, make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell turned on. Until next time, stay safe out there.